All right, so our speaker tonight is Chris Klosowski. He is from Easy Digital Downloads, and tonight he's going to be speaking about Reduce, Reuse, Refactor. Chris is a co-leading developer of Easy Digital Downloads. He's the founding developer of Post Promoter Pro, and a lifetime practitioner of hacker mentality, figuring out why, and loves to brew beer. I'm totally hacking up the speech here. So, yeah, I'll let you introduce yourself. Sure. Please come on up and show us out. Woo! Got myself a fancy pointer for this one finally. Cool. All right, there's some just bullet points so you can see them. I do write a little bit on software development and basically software development lifecycle, stuff like that. Not necessarily code, sometimes code at Kung Fu Graph. I do homebrew, so I don't have any with me this time, maybe next time. I'm kind of a weird dad. I watch Star Wars with my kids all the time, and they're really young, but they love it. And take them to things like the Ostrich Festival. And you can usually find me at most social places as C. Klosowski, Twitter and GitHub. Other places will be linked off from there. So tonight we're going to talk reduce, reuse, refactor. If anyone remembers, like when I was in elementary school, I was part of the recycling team, and it was reduce, reuse, recycle back then. But that doesn't really, you can't really recycle code. That's kind of more like reusing. Really, the idea is that time is money. We all know, I looked up some stats, the average WordPress dev can range anywhere from $30 an hour to $150 an hour. That can get really expensive. The longer you spend fighting with your code and trying to learn what code does when you join a team, that's a big one. If you buy code from someone else and then want to use it on your site, trying to figure out what they're doing, dev time isn't cheap, and anyone who has hired a freelancer understands that. But using a few things, we can actually really prevent inefficiency by kind of reducing our code complexity. I'll talk a little about some methods of reducing how complex our code is. Reusing some common patterns that you use over and over and over. When I was working on a script one time just to automate some stuff, I realized that by saving myself 10 minutes a week, I can actually save myself 40 hours across the year. If you can save 10 minutes a week with a repetitive task, you can actually save yourself that much time per year, an entire week in 1 year. And refactoring when needed, because every project manager loves to hear the fact that you want to spend time refactoring. We'll talk a little bit about why refactoring is not always a bad thing. One of the things we're not going to talk about is how to multitask, because multitasking these days is really something called context switching and why it's bad. And usually multitasking ends me looking like this with Post-it notes all over about what I need to do tomorrow. And I usually lose those or my kids grab them and color on them. So let's talk about context switching. Anyone know who Jeff Atwood is? He's a Coding Horror is his Twitter handle. So he goes by, I think his domain name is even Coding Horror. He did this really great article about why context switching is bad. There's a link. Those are I's, not L's, because I really used a bad font. So if you're managing projects, let's say these are 100% is how much time you devote to work. 0 or 1 to 5 is how many projects you're managing. If you're managing one project, you can devote 100% of your time to that project. That's pretty much it. If you're managing 2 projects, it's not a 50-50 split. You don't get to spend 50% of your time on each project as you're developing. You actually spend about 40% of your time on each project, and the other 20% of the time you actually spend ramping up into working on the project. That time of, okay, I'm done with this project, let's pull up the project for the new thing that I'm going to work on, let's figure out where we left off, let's figure out what I missed in the conversation, in the emails, or on GitHub, or Atlassian, or whatever you're using to manage your projects. So you don't actually get a good 50-50 split. And as you can imagine, once you get 3 projects, it really starts going downhill. You're only getting about 20% of your time per project, and the rest of it's, you're actually spending more time context switching. And 4 and 5 are just abysmal, especially 5. You're actually getting about 4% of your actual dev time in work. The rest of it's all trying to figure out where you're at with the work before you can even start. So obviously, in a perfect world, we would not have context switching. But we don't live in a perfect world, so we kind of have to deal with context switching as a necessary evil. So one of the things we can do is optimize our workflows. We can actually, there's this term called flow time. I've been using a resource called Codebase. It actually integrates with my IDE, and it will tell me when I hit flow times. Flow times are when I spend time coding in long amounts of long periods, and I don't leave the app, or when I stay in the single project branch for a certain amount of time. So it can take a look at what my flow times are. You may think that you sit down for an hour, and yes, I coded for an hour, but what you'll really realize is you spend, 15 to 20 minutes of that on GitHub, another 10 minutes on Stack Overflow trying to figure out your solution, and the rest of it Googling, and then typing in code. So if we can optimize our code bases to be a little more developer friendly, we can actually make it much, while we don't get to kill the context switch time, we can make the time we do spend in our flow much more productive. So that's the things I kind of want to cover. So the first one is reducing pure code complexity. And there's a great quote. Everyone pretty much uses OS X users, Mac, Linux users. So the guy who created or co-developed Unix, which is what all of our little Macs and Linux systems are based off of, wrote this great code of debugging is twice as hard as writing the code in the first place. So therefore, if you write very clever code, you are actually by definition not smart enough to debug it. So clever solutions make things hard. That's basically what it comes down to. But it's one of those quotes I've carried with me because the simplest solution is usually the best solution. I say usually because sometimes there's no true statement in code, basically. So complexity can be broken down to a few things. Things that are difficult to read. This could be because of white space or just the way you name variables or things like that. Tricky solutions, which I just mentioned. If you have to comment it just to remember how it works 2 weeks later, you might want to rethink how you did that. Has anyone ever heard of this? I never knew about this until I started researching this, but there's something called the Cyclomatic Complexity. And I think there's a service called Scrutinizer that will tell you your score on this, how complex your code is. Code complexity can be broken down by how many logic paths your code has to take. So if you have one if statement, that's just one logic, yes or no, does it go into here? But if you add another if statement inside that if statement, that's 2 layers. If else makes it worse. If else if, and then another else makes it just branches off into this huge tree of actual paths your code can possibly take. So the more complex your logic statements are, the higher the cyclomatic complexity is going to be. It's just really something to think about as you're writing, like, okay, well, how hard is this to actually follow the logic? I have to kind of break it down and write it on the whiteboard. Again, I probably want to rethink it. And yeah, I've got some examples for you, and these all come from things I've worked on or saw or currently do that I'm trying to fix. So hard to read code. This is a really simple example and one that we actually found in Easy Digital Downloads, the project I work on. The first one is what it looks like. The function execute data input comes with an array of arguments, basically a bunch of attributes I can send into a function. As a developer, if I'm new to the team or I'm not familiar with the code base, I actually have to look at everything that function does to figure out what's needed to be passed in to that function. I have to go and find out what keys in the array are required and which ones are optional. It takes time, at least a couple minutes. Remember that 10-minute thing? We can make it easier by saying argument 1, argument 2, argument 3. Now I know exactly what needs to be passed in. There's no guessing. Hard to read code, white space. This, as a small subset, isn't hard to read, but stack a bunch of code on top of each other without white spacing in between, without nice spaces in between characters and all that stuff, as a block of 1,000 lines, can be very difficult to follow. And we can actually make it easier with just a couple things. Easier to follow and easier to debug. We can throw in lines to debug things. We can handle adding code without messing up line spacing, things like that. This is actually following pretty close to the WordPress code standards, I think minus the indentation at this point. But adding those spaces in just makes it easier to read as you're kind of filtering through your code. So those are some of the things I do. Another one that you can do is come up with a coding standard before you start your projects. Come up with like everyone on the team, whether it's 1 or 10 developers, come up with whether or not you're going to use spaces or tabs in them. Come up with if it's going to be 2 or 4. Come up with a standard of, do you want spaces in your brackets? All these things should be decided. Do you want your brackets at the end of the if statement or under the if statement? The second you start adding more developers into the picture, it's going to get very easy to tell that multiple people worked on the project. And as your team grows, it becomes harder for people to read other people's code if it's not all styled the same. You're shaking your head. Have you run into this already?
Oh, no.
No, okay. Because you just recently joined a huge team, so I didn't know if you were.
They're good.
Sweet. Good to hear. Yeah, making sure that you follow a standard, even if it's just yourself in all your projects, makes it much easier later to be able to go through. This one's actually comes from Postmoder Pro in version 1.0. On release day, I got an email saying I white screened someone's site, which is never a good thing. I had a failure. I wanted to do something. Who's heard of Google Analytics? Yeah, okay, cool. They have this thing called the tag manager. So you can send in these awesome query strings. You'll see it on Buffer a lot. If you have buffer links, they use a campaign, a source, and a medium on all the links. That way, I can look at my Google Analytics and see where my traffic sources come from. That's what those are. I wanted my users to have it, and I did things like, okay, well, I have an array. I just want to convert it into a string with ampersands and equal signs. So I thought it'd be really cool and do it in one line. And if you can read that and debug it and tell me what it does within 3 seconds, although you just saw it on the last slide, it's not easy to read. It uses something called anonymous functions, which in JavaScript, if you do that, is called a closure. It doesn't really use good variable names. V, K, like, yeah, now I know that's key and value, but like, doesn't mean anything. And it's just not easy to debug. So I rewrote it as a simple for each statement. And now anyone who looks at that can quickly and easily figure out what it is, what it does. So little things like that. That's the tricky solution I was talking about. And the crazy part of the white screen is because anonymous functions aren't supported in PHP 5.2, which his server was still on, and WordPress still supports. So therefore, I broke his site. Not good on release day to have that happen. 1.0.1 came out like 5 minutes after I launched it, which was terrible. I brought up reusing common patterns. Usually, as you're developing your software, you typically have like a common pattern that you use across all your projects. You like to have the same naming conventions. You like to have the same directory structure, things like that. Standardize your function names. On easy digital downloads, everything is edd underscore. And if we're getting or setting properties, it's always edd underscore set underscore payment underscore customer underscore download. By setting those, it becomes very predictable what function you're supposed to be using. If you want to do something, you don't have to go look it up. Okay, I want to set this property of a download. Okay, edd underscore set underscore download underscore price. Done. I already know. I can guess what it's going to be. Same thing with if you're doing object-oriented. Edd underscore is all of our classes. Every class starts that way, so you can kind of guess at what it's going to be. Directory structure is a really important one if you handle multiple projects. Anyone build themes? Every theme you build has the same structure. You always have a CSS, you always got an index, always use an includes folder, always use, like, start building out what your base theme will look like all the time. That way, when you have to jump between projects, you don't have to think, where did I put this template of this theme? If they're all in the same place, you know that the content for a single is in an includes content single.php somewhere. You're not trying to find where you put it later. We actually did this with, the next one talks about abstracting your data models. We did this with Easy Digital Downloads Recurring, which I'll get into later. Anyone work with payment gateways? Yeah, a couple people. Payment gateway is just a way to process a payment with a credit card or PayPal or something like that. The funny thing is, payment processors all pretty much have the same end points. I want to charge a card, I want to authorize a card, I want to cancel a subscription. They all do the same functions overall. So why hand code each one of them separately? We can build what's called a base class. So with EDD Recurring 2.4, the recent release, we built EDD Recurring Gateway. EDD Recurring Gateway handles all the base functionality for what a gateway needs to do. Then all these other gateways just need to add their special functionality on top. We don't have to rewrite the code multiple times. We always know that when a payment is processed, or when EDD sends, okay, this checkout is complete, we need the gateway to do something. So in the base gateway, we can say, all right, my payments needs to be processed. Gateway that's chosen, go fire your call to the gateway and make the payment. We don't have to rewrite it 5 times. We just told it once. And based off what gateway was chosen, using object inheritance, which is a really cool method in PHP. If you're not really sure what it is, look it up. I could go into it. That could be its whole own talk, I think, object-oriented. So take a look at that if you can. But definitely a great way if you use the same type of data model over and over. We've actually included this concept in Restrict Content Pro, which is one of our products. Now we put it into a recurring product or a recurring payments extension, and we're actually going to be adapting this model in Easy Digital Downloads Core itself soon. So we always have this kind of idea of reusing common patterns that we use over and over and over, and that way when we have to swap between projects, it's very simple to know what we're expecting. Another thing we did was built a template. If we want to build a new extension, we built a boilerplate. We just drop this in a new folder, rename it, and all we have to do is do a find and replace on a certain string, and we have a whole new plugin ready to go. Obviously no code in it yet, like actual executing code, but our settings page is defined, our plugin headers are done, our construct for the object is done. All these things are really easy to do over and over, but with this, all we have to do is check out the repo and rename something and we're done. So if you can build a template of what each of your projects kind of looks like, this is a great way to start. Who has heard of refactoring? A few people. Refactoring is terrible. As a developer, it really stinks because it really forces you to do is look at all the bad decisions you made in the past, especially the ones when you're like, yeah, I was only developing for 2 months when I started that. 3 years later, wow, I was a really bad developer when I was 2 months into this. For those that don't know, refactoring is the process of restructuring your existing code without changing its external behavior, which is why it's really, really hard to get sign-off on refactoring because it doesn't really affect customers. The end result is always the same, well, usually the same when you refactor. All you're doing is making the backend more performant, more efficient, better extendability. But those are some of the benefits. We do get performance improvements sometimes in a refactor, depending on the decisions made. We do improve readability, hopefully. We do reduce our complexity, hopefully. And if you're seeing a trend here, refactoring can actually be a really good way to introduce the previous 2 concepts. We can use a refactor as the time to go back and make things the way they should have been the first time, which is what we did with Recurring 2.4. We helped improve the maintainability of it because of all these things. And what's really funny is WordPress as a project, what are we now, 12 years? I forget. We just had 10 a couple years ago, 12. I think we're at 12 years now. Not many projects span that long of a lifespan. So you can bet that PHP best practices have probably changed a little bit since Matt forked P2 back in 2004 or 3 or something like that. So refactoring is a really good way to take advantage of the new concepts that have been introduced in the framework of your projects, PHP, JavaScript, jQuery, stuff like that. The original JavaScript in WordPress wasn't jQuery. So once jQuery came out, they can refactor that slightly. And that's where the foundation improvements. Things improve over time in the bases we're using, so that means we can actually take the time to reintroduce them ourselves. And in some cases, improve extensibility. With Postmotor Pro, when I released 1.0, it was very hard-coded that it was Twitter. And then I had people say, well, I want to do Facebook, and I want to do LinkedIn, and a few other platforms. And I looked at the code and I said, that's really going to be a pain if I want to keep adding more and more platforms on top of this. So at version 1. I think it was 1.4, I basically threw away the code base. Not threw away, for the most part, threw away the code base and rewrote it from the ground up. using all WordPress hooks and filters, which means to add a new network into it, like working on Pinterest and working on a couple other ones. I don't have to rewrite a lot of stuff. I just have to use the hooks that exist. So actually, refactoring is a great way to go back and say, well, the first time I did this, I didn't think about X and Y. Now I can actually reintroduce ways to make X and Y happen as an extensible pattern, not a rewritable pattern. So I'm going to tell a little story about recurring payments coming of age, because this is where this talk kind of started. Recurring payments is actually a plugin that Pippin wrote to allow automatically renewing payments or subscriptions inside of Easy Digital Downloads. Back in August 30th of 2012, I looked it up in GitHub. This was the first commit ever to the GitHub repo. And it sat there for quite a long time. It allowed someone to buy one subscription. So if you had 10 products on your site, they could really only have a subscription to one product. And I think it supported like 2 gateways. So it didn't really support a lot, but it worked, and people used it. So then all the way in January 23, 2015, so what, like almost 3 years later, we were sitting at Pressnomics 3 up at Tempe Mission Palms. Most of our team flew in for that. And we were having a chat with other product owners about renewal rates. Because on each Easy Digital Downloads, you purchase a license key, and every year you have to renew your license key, or else you stop getting automatic WordPress updates. And we were talking about, okay, well, you know, I don't remember the exact number. I think it was 16 to 18% was our renewal rate, which means if 100 licenses were bought the first year, the next year only between 16 and 18 people renewed their licenses. It's pretty low, right? So we got around the table, and all of us were all kind of at the same boat, like, yeah, I mean, this is expected. It's manual. You know, people don't necessarily remember to do it. Then we got to one party of the table. I don't remember who it is, and even if it was, I don't know if I would say it because it's not my information to divulge. They said it was between 60 and 80%. Not 16 and 18, 60 to 80%, which is like 6 to 8 times what our renewal rate was. Because at that moment, we said, we want automatic renewals. We need to have subscriptions available on our site. Because as a business owner, if you're dropping 50% of your sales just because people have to manually renew, that's an easy choice. Figure out how to do it. So that was January 23rd, and the first commit on the 2.4 branch was actually 3 months later. And that was because we spent 3 months figuring out what we wanted this to look like. We were going to refactor. But, you know, we had the thought of, do we just create it as a whole new product itself and just end of life the old one, and it's a whole new product. People have to repay for it. We decided that wasn't right for our customers, so we built it as the same product. We had to figure out what we wanted it to look like. That's where the EDD payment gateway or recurring gateway class came in. We wanted to make things completely object-oriented, make things repeatable, make things easy to use, make it really developer-friendly, make it really extensible. And that was 3 months of talking, basically just discussions. Then you can see the time frame here. Almost a year after our initial conversation, we put the alpha version of this live on Affiliate WP and took our first subscription payment that day. So it took a year to get from concept, refactoring the whole thing, to actually live on a site taking payments. And in that time, we spent a lot of time discussing what the pattern should look like. And that's where refactoring, yes, it takes a long time sometimes. But the end product can be so much more if you just take that time to really discuss what you want it to be like, really think about those key factors, and kind of go that route. And then on January 28th, so just over a year later, we sent out a preview blog post that said, this is our new product. Tell us what you think. We had a couple beta testers. Ben was one of them. I was working with Todd here with it in the early phases of it. And then we actually went live on February 21st. So 13 months later, we actually went live with it. So 13-month life cycle of a refactor. And I can't be happier with the results. It's so much easier to use, so much easier to code in. It's not these helper functions all over the place. It's, you know, dealing with the subscription is as easy as saying new EDD subscription and then give it a subscription ID, instead of, okay, well, to get all the parts of a subscription, I have to go look it up, pull all the helper functions, pull it all out of the database, These things were much easier to handle after refactoring. You can actually, this is the development lifecycle of the reds are deletions from the code base, and the greens are additions to the code base. So did we add a lot? Yeah. We actually deleted quite a bit too. We just wiped out a ton of code. Said, you know what, this is not functional anymore. This is not the great way to do it. So let's just get rid of it. So a lot of people will say, you know, the more code, the better. Not always true. If you can get rid of that, yeah.
Did you rewrite it from scratch all over again? And are you so much more happier that it took you a year? Because
we didn't rewrite the whole thing. What we did was took, we kept like the core part of it intact, but anything related to what a subscription was, previously a subscription was just a bunch of functions of get the subscription expiration date, go get the subscription user, go get the subscription product. Like all these things were all these own like single functions, not go get me the whole subscription and it has properties assigned to it. So subscriptions are now their own database table. We used custom tables for all this, so it's much easier for us to manage on that end. And I am so much happier with it. Before, I was always afraid. A lot of the projects on our team were built by our boss, Pippin, or in the early phases when it was just him. And a lot of these projects have been his projects for years. So when things would come up like, hey, we have a recurring bug, I'm like, yeah, you get that one because I don't know the recurring code base very well. It was hard to look into just because he was so familiar with it that the ROI on me trying to learn it wasn't great. Now it holds the same pattern as like what we're doing with EC Digital Downloads. It holds the same pattern as what we're doing with other projects. So for me to now jump into it, it's very simple because it has the same structure as our other projects. And that's why it's so key to get like a commonality across all your projects. So yeah, that was some of the things that we kind of did with this. I say no backwards compatibility. It's in quotes, air quotes, because it will work if you just like install it and use it and you hand like customize some stuff with it. It will still work. Like there's backwards compatibility. However, we didn't fix all the little quirks. Previously, since it was only one subscription was allowed, we now allow multiples. So if you ask the old function is the active subscriber or get subscription of the old method to get it, it will just return the first subscription, whereas that may not be the one you want. So there's caveats to it, but at the most part, we didn't support full backwards compatibility because we wanted to say we need to move forward. Our old code base was not great. In order to fully move forward, we actually need to just ignore what we previously did. Sometimes that's necessary. I do believe in backwards compatibility, but sometimes to move forward, you have to kind of forget what you previously did. And we were very clear about all this in our blog post. We made it clear before we went live that these things were changing. And the communication is huge on that. That introduction, the gateway base class was huge because now we can cross it across all of our projects. We're going to reuse this at least 2 more times, I think. So anytime you can build something once and just copy and paste it with a couple minor tweaks, so much time saving. We actually introduced a bunch of new object-oriented classes. Like I said, previously everything was all these helper functions just to go get data out of the database. We introduced an actual subscriber class that talks to the user interface of WordPress and the EDD customer interface. We introduced the subscription table, which has its own class. We have, and the nice part is the subscription table can also get the subscriber inside of itself. So it's really easy for me to say, well, here's the subscription, here's all the subscriber data with it. We introduced emails and reminder classes. So all these things were just all, like I said, previously just these little one-off functions, but now we have an entire data model for what a reminder looks like, what an email looks like inside of our system. Completely refactored it, and that was, and then the magic part, we raised the price. It does so much more, and we spent so much time on it. We felt that, I think it previously sold for 83 is what the previous price was. We jumped the price to, I believe, 149 last I checked. Anyone who knows what it takes to build a platform like this looks at 149 and goes, yeah, you go, take it, I'll buy it. The crazy part is we weren't sure what that was going to do to sales. We weren't sure if that was going to be like, is this it's going to bring sales down. Obviously, it had its best earning months ever. I mean, we raised the price. How can the earnings not go up? But we also had the highest number of sales in quite a while. So adding functionality through refactoring may not be that nail in the coffin of the ROI that management thinks it is. So something to think about as you're doing it. If we can add more value while refactoring, because refactoring typically doesn't do front-end value, if we can do it at the same time, it does actually turn around and hopefully work. So that's all I got. I know it's quick, but actually it's 20 minutes. Questions?
I said the rate was 16%, you said before?
I think it was between 16 and 18, somewhere in that range. We rough estimated. We don't have a good stat on it. We were just sitting at a table talking about it. So.
Right now it automatically recurs, but I mean, what's your retention rate on that now?
Actually, this isn't live on our site yet.
Okay.
We are actually, it's live on Affiliate WP, but we just did it on January, so we don't know our retention because we're a yearly product.
Gotcha.
However, if I talk again this time next year, maybe I can give you some stats. I'm sure we'll actually write a blog post. So one of the things I really enjoy about our team is we're very transparent. Every year, Pippin does a blog post about the business, transparency report on earnings and stuff like that, how much we paid out in commissions. I am very positive that we will probably write about it. I can't guarantee it, but once we hit our 1 year mark with having it live on our site, I'm sure we'll talk about it. Yeah, Ben?
Retention rate based on cancellation. What would you say that is with WP? Because you've been running that.
Affiliate WP.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Affiliate, WP affiliate is a totally different product, and people get them confused all the time. I think the last I looked, I had to give a percentage. I think we were somewhere, I think I saw like 20 cancellations out of almost 700 purchases. So I mean, like, in a cancellation, so the funny thing about a cancellation and the way we did it was, since ours is a yearly product, you pay upfront for the year, and if you cancel your subscription, you still have access to updates and all that stuff for a year. Just when your year comes up, it won't automatically renew. So that's, I think, 20 people now out of 700 that's not going to renew. I think that's the numbers. I can't guarantee it. I looked them up the other day, but that's minor. That's nothing really. So, and they can still repurchase if they want to. So, yeah.
So I'm not familiar with the platform. What does it do? Affiliate WP on the website.
Sure. So Affiliate WP is one of our products. We have Easy Digital Downloads, which is what recurring payments is an add-on for. Affiliate WP is a WordPress-based affiliate program. So you can run your own affiliate program within WordPress with shops like WooCommerce, Easy Digital Downloads, WP Ecommerce, a lot of membership plugins, S2 Member, MemberMouse, Paid Memberships Pro. So as people are affiliates on your site, they sign up, purchase from you, they can actually have their own affiliate link to give other people, and you can give them a percentage of whatever sale they create.
Gotcha.
And how do you do the database on that?
It's its own custom table. We build custom tables for Affiliate WP. It's all within the WordPress database.
So is this something that like Advocare would use, or?
I don't know Advocare.
Oh, it's a multi-level marketing supplement company. Let's see.
So Affiliate WP itself doesn't do MLM style. However, there is an add-on sold via, I want to say his name's Christian. I can't remember his last name. But there is an add-on to Affiliate WP that will allow an MLM style affiliate program. Yes, there is one. We don't sell it on our site specifically, but
Can you show us a demo?
of Affiliate WP?
Yeah.
Yeah. Once I get through questions, I can do a demo of that one. Yeah.
Have you read Martin Fowler's book on refactoring?
I have not. What was that one again?
Martin Fowler.
I don't know.
It's called Refactoring. It's just called, it's fantastic.
Okay.
It's got patterns and anti-patterns to help use the pain of refactoring.
Very cool.
It's a really great book.
Who's the author?
Martin Fowler. Pretty much everything that guy writes is gold. So.
Is he like Bob Martin? You think Bob Martin writes pretty much gold?
Yeah, he's really, really great. He's all about the art and craft of software engineering. So I have like 3 of his books, and every single one of them I really highly recommend. He's got a really great design pattern.
Okay, now I gotta write it down because I've been reading a lot lately.
I've loaned it to you, but I've loaned that book out like 3 times and I never get it back.
I don't know why
you
bought it 3 times.
Yeah.
What's the name of it again?
I need to buy it again because I loaned it
Fowler.
6 months ago and I haven't gotten it back.
What's his first name?
Martin Fowler. It's just called Refactoring. I think the cover is black and red now.
Okay. A couple of the other books that I've read on software development that kind of touch on those same topics, the more the craft, is Clean Code, which is an amazing book. If you ever read Clean Code, go get it. And then One that I read every couple of years is called the Pragmatic Programmer. Also really good. A little bit bigger, a little thicker, a little more in depth, but it's a really good book.
So do you have a set of tests that you would run? So how do you know what you need to refactor? So for example, we inherited a site that's just gigantic.
Mhm.
There's a lot of code that just needs to be redone.
Is it open source?
No.
No.
But it's just like, I don't really know what to refactor until I become aware of a bug.
Absolutely,
And then
yeah.
I can look into it and I'm like, what the hell are they doing? This needs to be done. So like in your
Yeah.
case, do you have like periodic checks or do you have a test that you can run that's pinpoint areas you need to revisit?
So with easy digital downloads and stuff, the question, I don't know if the camera can pick it up, is there any tools you can use to like test for the complexity, things that need to be refactored? As an open source project, we have the luxury of using Travis CI for automated unit testing, which can then also build a code coverage report and send that to a service called Scrutinizer CI. I don't know what the paid plans look like on that. If you're attached with like a .org or an educational unit too, you might be able to sneak in like a student license. But Scrutinizer, what it does is it takes your code base, you tell it about your code base, where it lives, and it will go through and find like unused variables. It will go through, which are part of code complexity, things that aren't used, common patterns that are misused in PHP. You tell it kind of what language it is, and it tells you things that can be improved. There's a few things that it does for code complexity. It will tell you complex areas, and it definitely helps you figure out where you need to improve your code base and refactor. So Scrutinizer CI, I think they're just Scrutinizer is their domain name, but it's a great tool. That's the one we mainly use.
Are you doing unit testing on there as well?
We don't use it for unit testing. We still use Travis for the unit testing, and then we just have it ship the code coverage reports to Scrutinizer. But Scrutinizer does have, they will run unit tests too if you want them to. I would check that out and see if there's a way you can get into that one. I really dig the reports they send. The great part is they'll sometimes, if you can give it access to your GitHub repo, they'll actually have a button that just says submit pull request to fix common issues that it knows how to fix. So if you've got a bunch of white spacing that's wrong, or a bunch of unused variables, or your doc blocks are wrong, and they fix your doc blocks, you can just hit send pull request, and it will just ship over a code pull request to get up for you. It's pretty sweet. Like I'm just like, okay, cool. That's a bunch of stuff I didn't have to fix. Appreciate that. Awesome. Yeah, it's a really cool interaction. We luckily have a student, at least for a couple more months on our team, so some of our private repos get access to those things for short times when we want them to, but for the most part, Scrutinizer is the best for that I found anyways. I think they're a little pricey though if you don't have open source repos. Yeah, are you looking them up?
Yeah, well, I mean, their free plan, or their basic plan is €49.
So that's like $80.
Yeah.
I don't even know. I don't know what the transition rate or the
60.
60. Okay, that's what it was. The other way. Yeah, there are some ways to do this locally. I think there are some tools that you can find. It's not an uncommon thing to have to request is code complexity coverage like that. So if I find one, I'll try and post it out or something on Twitter. But now I want to look it up and see if I can do it locally, because I hate waiting for the report at Scrutinizer. It does it weekly for us. I get a weekly email with it. So, yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, actually. On when you guys redid the recurrent payments,
Yeah.
gateway, were you guys, because I'd like to do more unit tests.
Mhm.
Did you find that when you did that, you were able to integrate unit tests more from the beginning?
You know, I wasn't involved in the code base from the beginning. That one, again, stayed as kind of a little pet project for a while. It doesn't have unit tests on it yet. We are in the process. So this one's still a private repo. It's not a public one. So the pricing at Travis CI is also not favorable to non-open source projects. And we pay so much for private GitHub repos as it is, because those are pricey too. That we don't have them. We can run them locally. We do it for a couple of our projects. We just use our PHP unit for local unit testing. Yeah. It's something we'll be working on. I really wish we would have done it from the beginning. But I will tell you, we used If anyone's familiar with Easy Digital Downloads, we did release 2.5 back in January. And 2.5, that was a 5 or 6 month development lifecycle on that one, because we took the payment class, and how I talked about recurring was this a bunch of helper functions to just interact with data in the database. That's what the payment model used to be like in EDD, is everything was just helper functions to access database records, which is a pain in the ass to use, to be completely honest. I hope that doesn't block our YouTube account for saying that. But in 2.5, we introduced EDD payment as a class. The key was we could not break backwards compatibility. EDD payment had to work whether you were using helper functions or EDD payment, because it's just, the payment is the canonical source of an e-commerce store. I mean, that's, you break payments, you break e-commerce. You can't do that. I actually wrote the entire payment class from the ground up without ever testing it on the front end. I wrote the entire thing, so the current set of payments, like the current set of unit tests around payments and the new payment class, all passed in unit tests before I even started testing from the front end. So the great part about refactoring, if you have unit tests in places, you can do most of your code without ever having to visit the web side of things. You can just do it all through unit tests and then find the caveats later. So that's a great point. If you've got unit tests, refactoring is so much easier.
Yeah, I mean, we've considered, we've attempted and considered implementing them in some of our projects.
Yeah.
From a cost perspective, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Especially when you're working on so many projects, et cetera. But I always wonder, like, because we're working on some internal projects, and maybe we should write unit tests for those, make sure that they got full coverage of that kind of testing lifecycle, et cetera.
Yeah, I really love having unit tests. I'll be honest, like, I feel so much better about an EDD release now that I mean, we're still only like, I think we're something like between, I think it's 40 and 50, maybe 60% code coverage. So we're not even 100%. But knowing that we're in that range, I know that the main things break. Or the main things are covered, and we broke them. We know we broke them. So yeah, if you can get unit tests in place, then these refactoring things become much less stressful. Because again, you're not really changing the output, you're just changing the way the code is organized. And knowing that the output stays the same just means that your code at least does what it used to. Yeah.
So because your team is remote, I was just kind of curious, like, what kind of planning process like goes into that refactor then? Like, how did you guys like go about you you guys have like your set like verbs like EDD this?
Yeah.
So like, how did you guys sort of communicate that?
I think it just kind of with EDD it just happened because the code base already existed. With recurring stuff, I think we've just all accepted. We all use the WordPress coding standards to begin with. Like all of our editors are set with editor config. If you don't know what that is and you work on multiple projects, it's an add-on you can add to your IDE, and then you put a config file. It's like a it's just a .editor config file, and it defines how many spaces, is it tabs or spaces, what kind of line endings do we use, what, that kind of stuff. If you can add that in there, that means everyone's editor does the same thing all the time. Do we remove white space on saving? Yes, please. On empty lines. So like that kind of stuff. That's a big one. And I think the biggest one is code review, to be honest. I won't merge my own pull request unless like Pippin's just busy and he can't. And he'll say, yeah, it looks good to me. He'll comment and say it looks fine. I tested it, and then I'll merge it if he says merge. But the biggest one is if you have multiple people on a project, don't merge your own stuff. Just let someone else review it and merge it. They'll catch things like, hey, we don't use this pattern in our function names. It should be this to save that thing. So it's kind of a check thing, but we don't have there's no defined structure. I think it just kind of fell into place. But it's good to come up with one. Yeah.
Just curious what IDE you guys use.
Depends. Most of us are Sublime. I actually, it's funny you asked this question. I literally just bought PHP Storm for a year because everyone's been raving about it on my team, like 2 or 3 people, and I'm like, I used it 4 years ago. I'll give it a shot. I don't know yet. We'll see. I might stick with it.
Is that what you were using at Press site when you were at?
No, that was Sublime.
Okay.
No, I was still on Sublime then. I just switched to that like 3 days ago.
What do you use that with the WordPress-based
What's that?
thing? What do you use with that WordPress-based?
The boilerplate? That's just, it's basically like a sample plugin that we built ourselves. That's just a shell of what a plugin should look like. It's got the headers at the top that are required for a WordPress plugin.
Yes. Where did you get that?
That one's just specifically for us, like our extensions. I mean, it's open source, but the idea is if you're doing a common pattern, if you're a WordPress plugin shop, that's what you do. You build plugins or you build themes. Build yourself a base, like repository, that every theme you do is going to have this type of structure. That way, when you start a new one, you keep the common pattern. You're not trying to remember what you did last time or maybe alter something slightly. And it's just build it for anything you do. Like if you have a common pattern you like to follow, build a boilerplate for yourself. That way you're repeating yourself, not guessing what you previously had.
So you didn't get it from WordPress or whatever?
Nope, no.
Spaces or-
Oh no, that is, yeah.
What is that from?
That's just the WordPress coding standards. You can get that from, I think, make.wordpress.org. They have the-
Yeah, it's not the boilerplate.
No, no.
It's not the template.
Correct.
You made your own template.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Correct. I think we're running a little over.
I mean, we're still good if you got anything else you want to cover.
No? Good, unless
All
there's
right.
questions.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
There were a few important things